Hello you guys, welcome back to my channel. It is the third day in palette week where every single day for 7 straight days I am posting some sort of palette themed content. It'll actually be 8 days if you include my Bella Beauté art review, which I was going to include as one of my palette weekdays, but then I didn't mention it at all. So anyway, today we are going to be ranking all of my ODEN'S Eye palettes. If you are a longtime subscriber, you will know I have been such a big fan of ODEN'S Eye in the past. ODEN'S Eye was definitely my favorite indie brand and my favorite eyeshadow brand, in all of my collection at one point in time. But I feel like last year I really noticed a decline in the quality of the majority of the palettes that I was testing from them. I wasn't as impressed with their mattes. I was really struggling with a lot of their mattes. I will still say, in terms of their packaging, the artwork, and the theming of their collections, I think they nail that. And I do overall typically like their metallic or special shades. But ODEN'S Eye recently launched a new palette, and I actually talked myself out of that one just because I've been so let down by some of the releases from ODEN'S Eye, and they are just definitely not my favorite brand when it comes to indie makeup anymore. So I think when I do my end of year palette declutter, I actually might end up decluttering some of my ODEN'S Eye palettes, whereas in the past, I kind of viewed ODEN'S Eye as I do Natasha Denona, where I thought I would buy every single collection and almost collect the eyeshadow palettes. But there's definitely some, why is it, there always noise? There are definitely some palettes from ODEN'S Eye that I just feel like don't really deserve a place in my collection. So I figured I would rank my palettes, my ODEN'S Eye palettes, since I haven't done this yet on my channel before we get to my declutter and I declutter some of these. I do currently own 13 eyeshadow palettes from ODEN'S Eye, so if you're interested in seeing how I would rank my palettes from ODEN'S Eye, stay tuned. For if you have yet to subscribe to my channel and you like project painting content, palette themed content, or just chit-chatting about makeup, I'd love for you to consider subscribing before moving on. And other than that, let's jump into the video. My lowest ranked palette is, I think, the palette that made me the most angry with ODEN'S Eye, and it is the Spring Dragon palette in collaboration with Judy. And this palette, I think what made me the most upset is this shade right here, this dark brown. I just felt like looked so patchy and so muddied on the eyes, and I'm like, this is literally just a brown shade. I also have hard pan right here in the shade Flora, and overall the color story is definitely not an everyday reach for me, and I was just like, okay, the mattes in here I really struggled with. The shimmers just aren't my favorite. I do like this green shimmer shade and this purple shimmer shade, but overall I was just really underwhelmed with the quality in this palette, and this would be my lowest ranked. Next up is the palette that is currently on my eyes. This is the ODEN'S Eye Alva palette, and I put this on my eyes today because I really just had to know kind of what I still thought about this palette. And what I think about this is the matte quality is actually not that bad. I think this is a very old palette as well, so I feel like it's kind of getting a little bit dustier and took a little bit longer just to build up the deeper shades. The metallics, I feel like what will cause me to struggle to declutter this palette is that I think that this shade is just very sparkly when it comes to the metallic / sparkly shades, and I love a sparkle. So the lid toppers in here I think are beautiful. I really like Dandelion, Lilac. Golden Tulipa is also really beautiful metallic on the lids, but I also am like, okay, actually maybe I like this look a little bit better than I thought, but I don't know. This is one I could see myself potentially decluttering, just because I feel like the metallics aren't as impactful on my eyes as some of my other indie palettes, and the matte quality is definitely just declining because it is older. I will say I do like the mattes in this palette more than a couple of the palettes that are ranking higher, just in terms of specific mattes. There is something about the ODEN'S Eye mattes, I don't know what has happened. But coming in at number 11, I have the ODEN'S Eye Earthwood palette. It was really this collection that I feel like there were just some shades, this collection and the we'll get to another collection, that I was just like, what happened? So this is the Earthwood palette, and within this palette I do think there are some really beautiful shades. But for me, I really struggled with the dark purple shade right here in Petal, as well as the shade Leaves, which is this dark green. And overall, this color story just doesn't really speak to me. Like, I definitely have a lilac in like Sydney Grace Tiny Marvels that I could be reaching for if I wanted a lilac. I think my favorite shade in this entire palette would be either Blossom, which is this really beautiful kind of silver lilac-y metallic, or Strength, which is a really beautiful kind of taupey bronzy sort of shade, which I can definitely find in other palettes. So overall, just wasn't super impressed with this one either. And then coming in at number 10 is the last one in that collection. This is the Oden's Mighty Monster palette. Obviously, this is my favorite of all of them. I think the color story in this one speaks to me the most, and overall the quality in this one was the best out of all of them. Although I will say I didn't find that this red was uberly pigmented, and I did struggle a little bit with the shade Ophidian, the purple. So definitely still like quality issues in the mattes, at least in the palettes that I have. Potentially maybe I got a bad batch, but I've also noticed it in the like Stone and Rock collection, which we're gonna get to, like just something really lacking in the matte shadows. I will say I do really love the shade Midnight. I love all of the metallic slash special shades in this palette, so I don't necessarily see myself decluttering this one, but it's definitely not a favorite from Oden's for me. Coming in at number 9, speaking of that kind of Jewels and Gem Stone and Rock collection. So the Jewels and Gem palette, I was definitely, of the two palettes, most excited for, just because the like bluiness in this palette really spoke to me. But I really struggled with a lot of these matte shadows again. The shade Rapture, I really struggled with. Same thing with Intoxication, Transition. Like, it was the majority of the matte shadows in this palette that I really did not think looked good on the eyes. I felt like they were patchy, they did not blend well together, they muddied up. I keep this palette around because I do really love some of the special shades in this palette. I love the shade Rhapsody. It's like one of my favorite types of shades. It's kind of like a blue brown silver shade. I also like the shade High, which is this really beautiful green shade. But in terms of the quality of the mattes in this palette, I was not impressed at all. Coming in at number 8, I have the Oden's Flora Story palette. Now, I will say overall, I did really enjoy this palette. I will say here on out, like the palettes are pretty good in my opinion, pretty good to good / great. With this palette, I think the only shades that I struggled with was Sage. I just felt like this one got a little bit muddy. Everything else I really liked. I love the color story of this one. I like the purples and the greens. I think this is a beautiful one, and really only struggled with one of the mattes in that palette. And then coming right after that, I have the Oden's Sea Talk palette. This is another one where I was like, wait a minute, I don't know Oden's mattes typically to do this, but I really did struggle with the shade Night Swim and also Dolphin Tail, which I was kind of surprised by the shade Dolphin Tail. Now, I will say, I think this is such a fun color story, and again, I really love this palette for the like metallic and special shades, so I definitely would keep this one, but this one again, quality issues with the mattes in my opinion. Coming in at number 6, I have the Stone and Rock eyeshadow palette. Now, I will say, I love this palette for the shade High Spirits, and I feel like earlier this year when I was doing another ranking video, I ranked this one higher than some of the other Oden's palettes that I'm about to talk about. But then I really peeled back the layers and I was like, okay, I again just struggled really bad with Dreamland, Elevated, Passage, Cheer. The majority of the matte shadows in this palette were much harder to work with, didn't blend seamlessly, and I just, again, really struggled with mattes in this palette. The shade High Spirits will forever be one of my favorite green shades in my palette, I think, or in my palette collection. I think it is such a stunning shade. I love the shade Passion, Cheerfulness. Like, I love Oden's for their metallic shades, their special shades, their duochromes. But what is happening with their mattes? I don't know. Now, I will say I did have the Planet Spirit palette, but my daughter got into that one and it was destroyed beyond repair, which actually makes me really sad because that palette, all of the mattes, shockingly, performed so nicely. It was such a bright, colorful, fun palette, and the mattes blended seamlessly. Like, they basically blended themselves. Like, please take whatever you used for your matte formula in Planet Spirit, use that across all of your palettes. I don't know what else I can say, but I just kind of wanted to note that in case you're wondering, like, where's your planet spirit? All right, coming in at number 5, here on out, I absolutely love these palettes. This is the ODEN'S formula that I know and fell in love with. So coming in at number 5, I have the Hella palette, the original collaboration between ODEN'S and Angelica, and I think this is such a beautiful palette. The reason this one's ranking lower than the 4 above it just really comes down to color story, and there's definitely just a little bit more variety in the palettes that I'm going to share above this one. But the shade Double-Sided, I have a pan, and I think this is such a beautiful shifty shade. I also love the shade River for like a blue brown shade, and I've actually really enjoyed the shade Compete, which is kind of like a satin metallic, like deep gray. I love green eyeshadow, so I love this palette also for the greens, and I honestly have had fun with the pinks in this palette as well. This one was really well done. I wish all of their palettes were like that. Coming in at number 4, I have the Trick or Treat palette, and this was the collaboration last year. Okay, the shade Witch's Brew. I know we're talking about like the tippity top green shadows in my collection. Witch's Brew would absolutely be one of them. Again, just one of those like really rich, warm greens. Such a beautiful metallic shade, and I just think this is such a fun color story. This definitely screams Halloween time to me, and I just think that this palette has really stretched me outside of my comfort zone. When this first launched, I was like, wait, what do I do with this palette? And I have stuck to my comfort zone in some capacity, creating really beautiful looks with like the top row. But I also did a look following one of Angelica's tutorials where I did like mint with the like burgundies, and I thought that that was so beautiful. I'm so excited to play around with this one this fall season. I think this one was excellent quality. I really have no complaints over any of the matte shadows throughout this palette. So again, like, why can't this just like translate into all of their palettes? The Kelly Green matte shadow also just, oh, what a fun shade. Coming in at number 3, I have the ODEN'S Lil Ghost palette, and for me, I was really teetering between this and the Trick or Treat for which one would be number 3. But I think what it really came down to is, we know I love blues, and I also love these like ethereal, like periwinkle lavendery purples, plus the bright yellow. There's something just so fun about this color story. If I want something like a little bit more neutral, I can kind of reach for the bottom row and have fun with that. But I've created some looks that I absolutely loved with this palette as well. And again, no issues with any of the mattes. The shimmer and special shades in this palette are stunning. This one was excellent. I have no idea, I honestly don't, but I really would be so happy if there was another like Halloween 3 collection. That would be incredible. I definitely would buy that. Okay, coming in at number 2, I have the Christmas Eve palette. We know I love blues. Excellent formula. Had no issues with any of these mattes, and I think that the metallic and shimmer shades in this palette, like the shade Blue Star, I'm drooling. Such a beautiful, just rich, deep blue. I think that one is absolutely stunning on the eyes. I also love the shade Wonderful for, again, kind of like a lavender purple shimmer. I think this palette is so beautiful. Oh, and the shade Silvery Dream. What an interesting, like, taupey silver shade. Absolutely stunning on the eyes. I cannot wait to reach for this palette this winter season. Not that I have to wait, but we know I typically reach for my palettes seasonally. And then finally, my number 1 palette is the Merry Christmas palette by ODEN'S. I just think this one is so much fun and offers such a variety of shades. Fun fact, I actually almost only bought the the Christmas Eve palette and not this one, but I'm so glad that I got both of them. These shades Snowman and Little Star are just some of my absolute favorite types of shades. We have this kind of like teal gold silver shifty shade. It's so beautiful. And then Little Star is like one of those warm toned shifty pinks that I think are just so gorgeous on the eyes. I also love the shade Jingle Bell for like a fun green, and we have some like neutral warm matte shades. Again, I've had no issues with any of the mattes in this palette. I think this is an excellent palette from ODEN'S. I literally can't wait to reach into this one as well, and I don't know what has happened, but they need to bring back this formula. But after that, you guys, those are the 13 eyeshadow palettes that I currently own from ODEN'S. My thoughts, feelings, opinions, and ranking on them. I would love to know if you have any of these palettes, what your current thoughts are of ODEN'S. Are you having some formula issues with them? Do you really love them? Let a girl know in the comments below. Other than that, thank you so much for sticking around to watch today's video and for supporting me and my channel, as you guys always do. I love you guys so much, and I will catch you in my next video. Bye.